Welcome to PodForge, a deep dive into job hunt realities. So today we're diving into some eye-opening stuff about the job market for fresh graduates. We'll start with how ineffective job boards can be based on reports from sources like ZipRecruiter and Business.com, where a lot of applications just vanish into thin air. Then we'll unpack the ins and outs of internal job transfers at places like Amazon, drawing from first-hand accounts and Reddit discussions that show how these processes really work. And finally, we'll touch on broader strategies for navigating the job hunt, including what the data says about how many applications it might take to land an interview. This is all pretty frustrating, but also super insightful. So let's get into it and see what we can learn from these trends. All right, let's kick things off with the first big story, the sheer ineffectiveness of job boards for recent graduates. From what I've been reading in the ZipRecruiter annual grad report, it's clear that a ton of grads are using these platforms to search for jobs. But the results aren't always what you'd hope. Business.com highlights how graduates are struggling, with experiments showing that many applications don't even get a response, which, makes sense when you think about the volume we're dealing with. And okay, while the exact stats vary, sources like Uply talk about response rates being pretty low overall. So if you're a grad sending out resumes, it might feel like you're shouting into the void. Let me think about this. Why does this matter? Well, it's not just about frustration, it's about understanding that the job market is flooded, with CBS News reporting that applications are rising while job postings are falling, making it tougher than ever to stand out. Now, you might be wondering, how bad is it really? According to the recruiting metrics from CareerPlug, employers are dealing with a deluge of applications, which means a lot get overlooked. Think of it like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Recruiters have to sift through hundreds, and that leads to a lot of no responses. From Source 6 on Reddit, there's talk about how, on average, it might take around 10 to 20 applications to even get an interview, based on an 8.3% chance, which is way lower than what some folks expect. And this part genuinely surprised me, because I remember when I was job hunting, I thought a few apps would do it, but the data shows you need persistence. So basically, if you're a fresh grad, don't get discouraged. Instead, focus on tailoring your applications to improve those odds, like using keywords that match the job description. Let me try to explain this with an analogy. It's basically like fishing in a crowded lake. If everyone's casting lines, your bait has to be extra appealing to get a bite. Reports from Business.com emphasize that graduates need to be strategic, perhaps by networking or following up, rather than just blasting out resumes. And fair question, why aren't companies responding more? Well, from what I've gathered, it's partly due to overwhelmed HR teams and automated systems that filter applications, though we don't have exact percentages from the sources. This connects to the bigger picture because if job boards are this ineffective, it might push grads towards other avenues, like company websites or internal opportunities, which we'll get to next. Okay, that's a lot to unpack, but I think it's clear that the traditional approach needs some rethinking. Shifting gears to our second story. Let's talk about internal job transfers in big companies, especially at Amazon, because that's a fascinating angle from the sources. From LinkedIn posts and Reddit threads, like the one from David Anderson, we learned that Amazon's internal transfer process used to be pretty restrictive, things like a 12-month lock-in period after joining or transferring, and managers had to approve moves, which could be a hassle. I was reading this and kept wondering, how does that affect employees? Well, it meant people were stuck in roles longer than they might want, but apparently there were changes made as outlined in those posts to make it fairer, though the sources don't specify that internal candidates always get priority. So in practice, from Reddit discussions in Amazon employees, it seems transfers can happen after that initial period, and it's based on things like seniority for certain shifts, but it's not straightforward. And here's the twist. While the process has been transformed, as David Anderson describes, it's still not a guarantee, and employees have to navigate approvals and timing. I love this detail because it shows how internal mobility can be a smart way to advance without leaving the company, especially in a tough external job market. But what does that mean for fresh graduates? If you're already in a company, even in an entry-level role, using internal transfers could be a path to better positions, like moving from fulfillment to corporate, as mentioned in some Reddit posts. Let me think about how this works exactly. You apply internally, wait for approval, and if you're lucky, transition without starting over. This is actually really encouraging because it highlights that loyalty and performance inside a company might open doors faster than external applications. Now, connecting this to the bigger picture, internal transfers can help with issues like geographic flexibility, though the sources don't dive deep into international aspects. For instance, some Reddit threads mention how transfers might allow for shifts or locations within the US, but we don't have specifics on visas or overseas opportunities, so I'll stick to what's there. That said, Prioritizing internal candidates as implied in the transform process could be a game changer for grads who land an initial job. And okay, this is counterintuitive because you'd think external hires bring fresh ideas, but companies like Amazon seem to value internal growth. So if you're a listener fresh out of school, maybe aim for that first job and then look inward for advancement. Moving on to our third story, let's explore some broader opportunities and challenges in the job market, drawing from the sources on application strategies and market trends. From source 6 on Reddit, we know that it often takes 10 to 20 applications to get an interview, based on that 8.3% success rate, which underscores the need for volume and quality in your job search. I had to reread that because it's so eye-opening in a competitive field like IT, as discussed there. Grads might need to apply strategically to hit that number without burning out. While the sources don't cover visa sponsorship or specific international markets in detail, we can infer from general reports that non-US opportunities exist, like English-speaking roles, but I won't speculate beyond what's provided. Think of it like this, it's basically a numbers game, but one where preparation matters, such as optimizing your resume to beat applicant tracking systems, even if we don't have exact stats from the sources. The CBS News article points to tougher odds overall, with fewer postings, so exploring markets like those in Europe might be an option. Though again, we're limited to what's in the material. And fair question, how does this tie back? Well, for grads facing us job board woes, considering internal paths or alternative strategies could open up, like the transfer processes we discussed. This is genuinely fascinating because it shows the job hunt isn't just about boards, it's about being adaptable. To wrap this up, let's recap what we've covered. First, job boards are often ineffective for fresh grads, with low response rates and the need for multiple applications to land an interview. Second, internal transfers at companies like Amazon offer a promising alternative despite the hurdles. And third, strategic approaches from the sources can help navigate these challenges. I mean, that's wild when you think about it. The job market is tough, but there's hope and persistence and smart moves. So if you're out there applying, remember to stay curious and keep refining your approach. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Until next time, keep hustling. One more thing before we sign off. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that subscribe button and share your own job hunt stories. I'd love to hear them. All right, that's it for today. See you next time.